So remember, everybody is on mute. So if you have any questions, just feel free to put any questions or comments or whatever in the chat box there. And so we'll talk tonight a little bit about Project 2 and how to do that. And I'll show you some examples of really good student projects. So if you want to kind of use those as sort of an example to follow, you can. Just before we get started, though, just a couple of reminders. For I noticed that for Project 1, there's still some people that were a little bit confused about the point of the assignment. Remember, this is not like well, from last week's assignment at least. It's not a cover letter for a job. And remember, this does not have to relate to your final business plan. So in other words, there were some people I think that were basically kind of writing a cover letter to like some studio or something like that. Remember, the point of this class is to have some type of creative work where you can try to get that distributed. In the first part of class, we're going to do that the traditional way, which is finding an agent and sending that agent either a treatment, a proposal, a press kit, or or a game treatment. So one of those four, or TV treatment. And we'll show you this starting next week how to go about self-publishing that. But I just wanted to make clear, for those of you that may have missed last week, just a reminder that the projects that you do for this class do not have to relate to your final business plan, and you need to have some type of creative work. Remember, it doesn't have to follow anything regarding your business plan. You can have fun if there is a book project that you've always wanted to do or maybe thought about doing. That's okay. This is the class to kind of shop that around. And even if you don't do that ever, but even if you don't, if you might have plans for it, but you don't ever do that for several weeks or several months from now, that's fine. The point of this class is to show you how you would go about getting it distributed. Okay, so just want to make that clear. So Daphne asks, okay, they do not have to relate, as in not required, but can be related. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so certainly you can. So it certainly can relate to your final business plan, but it doesn't have to. Okay, so just want to make that clear. Also, this is not really a big deal, but I just wanted to clarify. In fact, this probably should have been brought up in previous months, but it's not a really big deal. But for the discussions, I noticed that sometimes people, what they're doing is a lot of times you're doing your discussion, and then at the end of your discussion, you're putting in all these references, but those references are never cited in the text. So it's fine if you go about doing outside research and everything, but technically you wouldn't put that as references or works cited. Rather, that would be works consulted. Okay, so if you do cite a source, then certainly you would put that at the end. But what I'm getting at, I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but basically, like, you could have a long text, and let's just say that I'm doing a discussion post, and this is being hypothetical, but let's just say I'm doing a discussion post on Godzilla that's coming out this weekend, right? And let's just say that I'm going to be talking about the special effects we're using Godzilla, and let's just say that I'm going to all these different articles out there, like maybe there's an article in the New York Times, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal, there's an article in Entertainment Weekly or something like that. That's all fine if I go there and I do the research, but you would not put those as a reference or work cited unless you're addressing, like a quotation or a paraphrase in the text. So there's a difference between works cited and works consulted, right? Because anybody can just do make up any kind of post and then at the end just say, oh, I cited like 15 different sources. Well, you didn't really cite them, did you? You maybe consulted them, but you didn't cite them. So just wanted to make that clear. Not a big deal, but just make sure that if you do cite a source at the bottom, like in your references, make sure that you also cite it inside your text as well. And also, just a reminder too, that for this class, we're not really focusing on talent and booking agents per se, because I noticed that a lot of people from the discussions last week were still kind of talking about talent and booking agents. Remember, that relates a little bit more to your previous project and artist management class, or yeah, product and artist management class. So that class was kind of about talent and booking agents. This class is about not shopping the talent, but shopping the creative work. Now, it is true sometimes those things can overlap, and you guys did a really good job actually of explaining that also in the cover letter. So I just wanted to to emphasize that though, that for this class we're talking about shopping the creative work. We're not talking about shopping you, the talent, and getting you gigs. Again, sometimes those things can overlap. But so, anyways, though, what we're going to do for tonight here is look at project two, and what we're going to do for this week is actually we're going to assume that you did your project one and the artist, or I'm sorry, the agent loved what you wrote in your query letter. And technically speaking, when you submit the query letter, chances are you would probably be submitting project two along with the project one query letter, right? But for the purposes of this assignment, we're going to assume that you didn't necessarily, but that's the point of project two. We're going to assume that project one was loved by your agent. The agent just loved it, and he or she says, okay, send me what you have. And this is what the point of project two is. Okay, now keep in mind here that everybody's project two is going to be a little bit different. Project three is going to be, everybody's just going to follow the same template. But for project two, we're going to have different templates for different groups, meaning that those of you on the music side are going to be doing a press kit. Those of you on the game side are going to be doing a game treatment. And time out for a second, there's also a distinction that has to be made between what a game treatment is and a game design document. A game treatment is a lot more terse. It's a lot shorter, and we're certainly not going to ask you guys to do a game design document, which can be 80 to 100 pages, right? We're not going to ask you to do that. We're going to do a game treatment, and I'll show you what that is coming up. Those of you that are on team books are going to be doing a book proposal. And by the way, that includes magazines and also nonfiction and fiction books. Okay, I know that it might say in the template, it might say something like nonfiction book proposal, but you're going to follow that template even if you're writing a fiction book, right? And then finally, what am I leaving out here? I think if you're on film or television, you're going to be doing a treatment, a film treatment or TV treatment. So that's what we're going to be talking about up tonight. So if we just look at the instructions for project two, we're going to ask you to consult these materials here, which I'm going to show you. These are all in the appendix, by the way. So here's the templates that we're going to look at here, and just the grading rubric, of course, it's broken down like this. Content is 12, organization coherence is 4, purpose is 2, and grammar and spelling is 2. So it's worth 20 points total, right? And let's see what Kim put down here. Students may not reuse identical that was submitted in for. Okay, yeah. So yeah, just make sure that you're not reusing content that you had already used before. But that being said, though, you can use some material as long as it's worded a little bit differently, but just don't submit the exact same assignment, right? Okay, so that's kind of the breakdown of what project two looks like. And let's go to the appendix here. And before I show you examples of what you can follow, let's just look here. This starts on page 94. These are the templates. Here's the instructions for each of the teams. And we'll start with how to write a film treatment. And you could actually see this. This is right from, you can do a Google search on Carol Clues, and this is her description of how to write a film treatment. But as I kind of mentioned today in class to the on-campus students, keep in mind that if you go on Google or you go to some industry book or you go to, for example, Peter Jackson's book, or a book on Peter Jackson, or a book on Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg or whoever it might be, they might give you instructions. They might show you examples actually of treatments that were written for their movies. Okay, and it is true that everybody sort of in the industry has their own definition of what a treatment is. Okay, and so just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to ask you for project two to just follow this formula. Okay, and or this template, if you will. So you can read through the instructions here. We won't go through all of it, but basically make sure to have, a cover page. We're not too picky about like this, 14-point font and top center or whatever, but just make sure that you have a cover page, have your name on the cover page, have the registration, or have the title of the course of the work, title of the film on the cover page. Make sure that you have your name, Writers Guild registration number. You can make it up, right? But you just want to indicate to the agent that in some way that it's registered. The funny thing is as well, I will say that even if you are just a total cheapskate and you say, I don't want to register my work, well, in the industry, they actually advise you to just lie and say that it is registered. At the worst, don't even put the registration number, but just say that it's registered, because that alone, even if you're lying and not encouraging anyone to be dishonest, but that alone will probably scare anybody off from trying to copy your work or plagiarize it. Okay. So then the next thing is, you'd have a table of contents. Now in it, you want to have your author bio, a cast of the main characters. You don't have to have every character, but cast of the main characters, locations, and then the treatment itself. You want to have something that's called, if we look down here, okay, small description of the main character or main idea. So this is similar to like a log line, right? Similar to kind of a teaser pitch, but just kind of a brief description of, in a few sentences, about what the film is about, what's the hook or the selling point, right? Then you would want to have list of locations. So the reason why locations are important are not just for the agent, right? It's not just for the producer even. It's for, in part, the set designer, right? It is for the producer because the producer wants to know, where does this film take place? How much is it going to cost? Is this going to be like, taking place in outer space, like Gravity? Is there going to be like a lot of special effects? Or is this going to be a simple setting like Office Space or something like that, right? So the agent wants to know that, the producer wants to know that, and the set designer wants to know that, because they're going to want to know, if they're in charge of the department of putting up the sets and everything, they're going to want to know how much it's going to cost, how many people they're going to need, what resources they're going to need, etc., what props they're going to need, things like that. Countermeasures is basically what's the main conflict, right? So this doesn't have to be very long, but what's the basic conflict of the story? Every good story is going to have some type of conflict, whether it's internal, such as maybe a woman who's upset with their husband who she thinks is cheating on her or something like that, whether it's an internal conflict or whether it's external conflict, whether it's trying to, in Jurassic Park, whether it's trying to stop the dinosaurs from taking over the world or whatever, right? Then you would have kind of a listing of scenes here. And, but I want to emphasize though, that you don't need to necessarily include every single scene, but at least break it down into acts, right? Because at this point, like I said, you don't have to have a full treatment. You just have to know enough about your story to be able to explain what happens in the film, right? So you don't need to know, for example, if it's going to have like 50 scenes. In fact, I just saw this thing where they basically said, I think the number is somewhere, I think they said it's something like 46 to 52. Like most movies have like 46 to 52 scenes, or at least sections, how they call it. And so you don't have to know all like 46, but at least be able to tell basically the agent what happens from start to finish, right? So that's a film treatment. So let me show you an example of a film treatment. Actually, I'll show you a couple here. Let me look at this one first. Okay. This is a film treatment for Wanderers. Now, we took the student's name off just to make them anonymous here, but you would have your name here, and so the title is Wanderers, right? You can even, if you want to put this in italics, something like that, that's fine. And then if you want to put something like, written by your name, whatever, and then you would put register by the register or by the Writers Guild of America, and you can make up a number. It can be a hypothetical number, it can be a fake number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's fine. Then your table of contents here. Now, there's some things here that the student did that could have been improved here, but you have your biography. So growing up, remember, I just replaced it with XXXXX. So you have your biography here, right? Then the next section is the cast of characters. Now, this student did a really good job here of explaining who the main characters are. there's looks like he or she put down looks like 6 characters, 6 main characters, and in fact, this is actually something that's really, really important. In fact, if you ever look at a script, a screenplay, and this is actually something that I myself am guilty of too, because I just had 2 screenwriting classes last year, and one of my one of the things that I need to get better at is describing the characters in the script. If you ever look at a script, by the way, a good I'll put this down on the chat board here, but a good source to look up, and I don't know the website offhand, like what the URL is, but if you ever want to see some examples of scripts, just type in a search on Google there. I put it in the chat box for screenplays for you. It's a really good site out there that has tons and tons of film screenplays that you can look at. And if you look at the really good ones, when they introduce a character for the first time, they really give a pretty good description. And you need to do that also in the treatment tier. In the cast of characters, they want to know demographic information. They want to know things about the character, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, where they're from, who they like in the story, who they dislike, who are their enemies, things like that, right? So that's what the student did here. Pretty good job. Locations, though, they could have expanded on this section a little bit. It says here all scenes will take place in this Seebeck, a rural area overlooking the massive in Washington State. You know, they could have actually expanded on this a lot more, right? In fact, if you even want to make like a bullet list of locations, yeah, thanks you, Daphne, for that. Yeah, so that's a good site to check out if you ever want to see some examples of scripts. And then though they do a pretty good job here. This is probably lengthwise. This is probably good enough. You might want to go a little bit longer. I'll show you another example coming up here of a student though that did a little bit better job, but still though they have a pretty good description here. They have the synopsis about the characters, like what happens, then they break it down into acts. Remember, you don't have to have necessarily a scene by scene description, but at least, 3 acts, right? Because every story they say has 3 acts. That might not be so much true today, where you have a lot of back and forth plots and lots of twists and turns and convoluted structures and things like that. But traditionally, you have the 3 act structure, right? So this student is just kind of explaining what happens from start to finish in the film, okay? So that's what it would look like. Technically speaking, you would probably want to have page numbers as well. So you would just go up here and just go up at the top. And then I would go to, just go up to the inserts, page numbers, and I would align it to the right. Remember, this doesn't have to be APA, meaning that you don't have to have like your running head or anything like that on every page. Um, but that's what a film treatment would look like. And actually, you know what? And Christine or Christopher asks, are these examples on FSO? No, they're not. But maybe I can see if Kim can put these up there if it's okay. Yeah, but yeah, these are technically not. But remember, these go-to sessions are being recorded, so you can always go back here and take a look at these again through that way as well. So, but let me show you an example too of maybe a little bit better job from last month, actually. Okay, so again, this title is called Help Me Entertain My Kids and registered with the Writers Guild East. This reminds me too as well. There's actually 2 branches of the Writers Guild of America. There's Writers Guild East and Writers Guild West. They both are pretty much okay. I mean, most scripts that you'll see are going to be registered West. That's just because, that's Hollywood. But Writers Guild East, there's a growing number of films that are produced, and screenwriters for that matter, that are coming out of the East Coast, like especially Atlanta and even down here in Florida. So, but either way is okay. Just make sure that you have the registration number. It can be made up. It can be real. Then the table of contents. And if you want to get real particular here, what the student could have done here is put down like the page number. So let's just say that the author bio starts on page 3 and cast of characters is 4. And the way that you do this is you would just go something like this, right? and something like that. So you get the idea, right? Okay, so look at the extensive detail that this student provides, right? Born and raised in Miami, Florida. I took his name out, but well, you can see here his first name is Ryan, but so he's got a pretty good biography here. Probably more than you actually need, I would say, but nonetheless, really good job. Characters, okay. Once again, he's talking about demographic information, where they're from, and providing a good lengthy paragraph about each of the main characters, right? In this case, I remember this story actually. There's only 3 main characters. He could have perhaps added some more here, nonetheless. Locations, again, this is another section where he could have actually expanded. Actually, I should have brought up another example where somebody really did a good job of describing the locations. You would want to, like, let's just say you're taking, like, um, a movie, a story, and let's just say that it kind of takes place across like a campus or something like that. You would not just want to put like all locations will be in, like, the University of Central Florida or something like that. You would want to be very specific. You would want to identify classroom buildings. You would want to identify classroom settings, uh, professors' offices, um, the sidewalks, the reflecting ponds or whatever it might be. Go into detail. Don't just be very terse on that, right? And then you can see here, he does a really good job of describing the synopsis, sort of the one paragraph description of what the story is about. And then he breaks it down into acts, right? And this is probably a lot more information than you need, but nonetheless, really good job. And I can say that usually, the students that do the best on this project are the ones that give Kim and I the most amount of detail, right? Because we're kind of playing the part of the agent. So rather than just giving us, uh, uh, 800 word kind of, put together to the last second treatment, we're looking for a lot of detail. It, on that note, though, it doesn't have to be a specific page number. We don't specify minimum or maximum, but nonetheless, though, the students that usually do the best are the ones that are able to describe what happens in the film from start to finish with a lot of detail. Okay, so that's the film treatment. Okay, so the next thing is the TV treatment. This is very, very similar in not in structure necessarily, but in terms of content, what you're going to be doing here. This is just right from the writers, television writers vaults. And you just follow this template. You want to have your author name. You want to have the title of the show. You should probably identify a title, even if you don't know for sure. Like, because sometimes you'll see like working title or something like that, or untitled project or something like that. Just for the sake of, even if you change it later, that's okay. But just for the sake of this project, title it something, right? Even if it's going to be changed later, and even if it's going to be changed later, right? Then the format of the show, reality, game show, made for TV movie, etc. Then the log line, this is the elevator pitch, the teaser pitch, and then the treatment itself, detailed description of what the show is, what it's about. And this is just a sample one, right? This is the author name, available upon request. I mean, we just put that in there because that can be your name. The genre is a reality show. The title is Broadway Bounds. The log line is just, once again, just that 1 to 2 sentence pitch. The synopsis would be, we generally say about 3 to 7 paragraphs. Okay, so it could technically be more than that if you want, but just at least 3 paragraphs outlining the content of the show. And then, so for example, in this case, they give you that, right? And then, okay, here's the thing. Once again, this is this area where you can go online and you can see sample TV treatments, and they might have listings for, like, you know the first 22 shows, right? All we're asking for Project 2, for those of you on Team TV, are just the first 7, okay? Like, as you guys know, like, if back in the 90s, there were shows like Beverly Hills 90210 that would have some ridiculous number of shows per season. It was something like, 28 shows per season, which is really outrageous. And then on the flip side, you have shows like most modern shows that are about, I'm just, this can change, but, maybe 12 shows per season, right? But for this assignment, all we're asking for is the first 7. And to be honest, in the real world, somebody even said that like, you probably don't have to have the entire first season outlined, but at least have enough to have like the first 7, right? You want to have more than the pilot, more than the first one, but you don't necessarily have to have 25 episodes, but at least the first 7. Like, just explain a brief paragraph about what happens in the first 7 episodes. Okay, so let me show you a student example. Okay, this is a book. We'll get to that here coming up, but you know what? I apologize. I thought I could have swore I had a TV show. Actually, you know what? I know I do. Here, give me a second. 1 second. I know. Here we go. Okay, now this one. In fact, I thought I had another one, but anyways, okay. This one is an example of a pretty good treatment. But if I'm not mistaken, this is the one that had a lot. Yeah, okay, yeah. This one, if you take out, there's a lot of typos in this, just because this student happened to be like language or English is not her first language, but content-wise, this is kind of what we're looking for here. So aside from some typos here, she does a really nice job here. This is a reality TV show, and actually, I think the idea for the show is really really good. I don't know if she's going to do this for real, or I don't know if she just thought of this, just for the purposes of this project. But it's actually a really good show if you look at it. We're not going to go through the content, and that much here, but the log line is, what would a homeless person living on the streets decide to do for 24 hours if there were no limits in fulfilling their dream? That's what they mean. Listen to their stories. And then she gives a synopsis about kind of the setup of the show. If you look down here, the Unfortunate Get Fortunate reality TV show is telling the life-changing stories and giving homeless people 24 hours of living their dreams and giving them hope for their future. And so like she lists, again, the first 7 episodes here. And she actually, if I'm not mistaken, she has 7 different people. Remember, this is a reality show, and so again, she goes to like 7 different cities here, and then she has people that had problems with drugs and now are on the streets. And then, like, what would they do if they had 24 hours to fulfill their dreams? And so, again, you could see she's providing a pretty good paragraph, lengthy paragraph for the first 7 episodes. Okay. I don't think it really. You don't have to provide budget information. She says 2 million, but that's not really specified here in the instructions. If we, whoops, yeah, that's not really specified in the instructions. You don't have to provide budget information necessarily. And then location, United States. She could have said, cities around the United States, but you don't really need to do that, right? So that's an example of a TV treatment. Okay. Okay. Next, moving on. Game design specifications. Okay, now here's something that has to be emphasized. For those of you on team games, I don't know if there's anybody online that is going to be doing a video game. I know that there's nobody in class that's doing a video game, but there might be some people that are doing a video game that are online students. Just so you know, okay, uh, a game design document, what you would do in real life, is usually much more extensive and elaborate and sophisticated than a book proposal or a film treatment or a TV treatment or things like that. The reason being is that there's a lot more tech stuff involved. And, most people, not most people, but I mean, a lot of people that are into game design, they come from a very heavy background in computer science. So there's a lot more tech stuff that you really have to get into with a game design document, and those things can be very, very lengthy. And actually, that reminds me as well. Let me take time out for a second. Let me also go back up here to a film treatment. Okay, one thing I want to emphasize too, that I showed you that site, Screenplays for You, which is a good site to see screenplays, but those screenplays were original screenplays, okay? Those are not the same things as shooting scripts. In fact, in screenwriting, they tell you specifically don't write camera angles. Sometimes they do, but usually the people that do those are the types of people that also are going to be directing. So, for example, if you look at the shooting script for Goodfellas, for example, like you have the original screenplay that you can see, you can probably find online by Martin Scorsese and Nicholas Pileggi. But the shooting script looks a lot different because in there, Scorsese will even put like, storyboards. He'll have camera tilts this way, camera tracks Henry and Karen as they go into the Copa, things like that. You don't really put that into the script as a screenwriter. So a shooting script looks a lot different than a film treatment or a film script. So so Daphne says, I thought my idea was around that, but apparently not. Maybe we'll see. Okay. So I assume you're assuming to that TV treatment idea, Daphne. But so anyways, but my point is oh, okay. So video games. Well, Daphne, I'll show you what we're looking for in a game treatment. I'll show you a couple examples or one example. I was actually looking for a different one before we came on, but but I just want to emphasize. So when you're doing the film treatment, avoid or TV treatment, avoid putting like camera stuff in there because that's going to look really bad. Agents hate that, right? They're going to say, look, you're the writer. We'll get somebody to direct it. They can make the choices with camera angles and stuff like that. So avoid that kind of stuff. But a game design document, though, can be very, very long. You certainly, Daphne, if you want to do a game design document, you certainly can, but you don't have to. In fact, there's not really a specific template that we can give you for the treatment, but we do ask that you just follow some of these things here. Okay, so this is like format for game design specifications. So we're not asking you guys to do a game design document necessarily, but we're asking you to provide a game treatment, which is kind of a watered down, very truncated version of game design documents. So you certainly can put in technical information. In fact, that you're going to probably, but you don't have to go into as much detail as you might see. Like if you go down the road here, down in Maitland, for those of you that are here in Orlando, in Maitland, of course, you guys know EA Games is down there, and that's where they make the Madden games and the Tiger Woods golf games and some others. And if you go down there and you ask to see an example of a game design document, those are going to be very, very extensive. You don't have to do that for the purposes of this assignment, but you might include some of the same things that are on there. So what you want to do here is just answer some of these things. So Daphne, if you're going to be doing a game, that's fine. You don't have to follow every single thing that's on this list, but just consider some of these things. A game treatment is similar to a film treatment in the sense that you might want to follow the same format structurally as the film treatment. So you might want to have your author biography, um, your kind of log line of the game, and then you would go through with the game treatment itself. So here you would have general information. First of all, what's a brief description, kind of the log line of the game, if you will. Then maybe a little bit more detail. Um, then you want to have like, what's the high concept? How could you pitch this in like one sentence? Then the background story, if applicable. Sometimes you don't have a background story. So for example, sometimes the goal of the game is simply it's a sports game. You're just trying to beat the computer or beat the opponent that you're playing online or something like that. But some games like Zelda, for example, and some other games, Prince of Persia, for example, they have a very extensive background story. So if that's the case, tell the story, right? What's the story of the game? Then what's the tone of the game? What's the basic narrative or how you would consider the heart of the story? And once again, I'm going to show you an example of a student project from a couple months ago. But What's the objective of the game? Is it to get the most points? Is it to rescue the princess? Is it to just beat the opponent that you're playing? How does the gameplay work from beginning to end? After you turn on the system, what happens, right? Or some of you might be doing a computer game. If you once you put in the game, or once you start up the game, what happens, right? What does the title screen look like? Are there options on the screen? What are the choices? You know, some games, they'll right off the bat, they'll say, what level do you want to play this at? Beginning, intermediate, advanced, you know? Um, and then you can kind of read through this, but what's the AI of the game? Is this a game that's going to have very, very sophisticated graphics, meaning sophisticated, meaning in a good way, like very, very good, impressive graphics? Or is this going to be a game that's going to be for example, the Wii or the Wii U? And that's not to pick on the Wii or Wii U, but a lot of those games are meant for little kids, right? So every game's going to be different, but what's the artificial intelligence of the game? Like, what are the what's the computer like, right? What's the plan interface? What is the plan perspective? Is this a first person game, third person game, etc.? What is the interactive structure? So some games have, like, 58 different levels, right? Other games might have only 10. So how does that broken down? So, like, yeah, 3D compatible, exactly, Daphne. So yeah, so what are the graphics like? Is this going to be 3D compatible? What's funny, speaking of the games, is that I didn't know this until recently, but I didn't realize that a lot of the games that are on PlayStation 3 are not available on PlayStation 4 yet. So it's kind of funny, they kind of rushed PlayStation 4 into development and they got it out, but they didn't really tell a lot of people that you can't find Grand Theft Auto 5 on PlayStation 4 just yet, right? So it's kind of funny in that sense, right? Um, so what is the heart of the gameplay? Speed, action, turn-based, etc. How does the multiplayer work? Right? Some games, to be honest, some games, that's the main selling point, is the multiplayer work. Going back way back in the day to GoldenEye for Nintendo 64, remember, that was one of the big selling points. Not that the rest of the game wasn't great, because it certainly was, but one of the big selling points was the multiplayer aspect, and that you could go to have tournaments, right? I remember tournaments back when in my undergraduate days where they'd have GoldenEye tournaments and things like that. So what's the multiplayer like? How difficult is the game? Can you adjust the difficulties? Um, how long will it take the average player to complete? Right? Is this a game that is going to be very, very long? Or is this going to be a game that is going to be relatively easy to complete? And then other aspects, characters, single versus multiplayer, or single and multiplayer. Are there other key characters? Are you going to use, like, another, for example, movie for that? Now, that might be difficult, though, to get the rights, right? In fact, in our text, chapters 11, 12 talk a little bit about licensing and things like that. But I mean, if that's the plan, explain your license exploitation. Okay, Daphne, yeah, is the best. That is the game, COD franchise focused on the first person shooter movements, right? Yeah. And then down here, what's the world like, etc. Controls. So what I'm basically getting at, though, and then you can read through this, graphics, things like that. What I'm basically getting at, though, is that if you look at a game design document, it's going to have all of these things probably, mapped out extensively. You don't really have to follow every single thing that's on this list, and you certainly don't have to go into extensive detail on everything that's on this list, but at least kind of discuss the main things for your treatments, right? And sounds and music, things like that. So let me give you an example of a game treatment here. Okay, so this is an example of a pretty good one. Um, so this is a game for Android. I took the student's name out um, to be anonymous, but even before I go on, I should say here that you can, if you're really tech minded, and if you want to, if you actually have screenshots or even storyboards, it doesn't have to be screenshots, but I mean, if you have like drawings or stuff, you can definitely include those. It's not required for this assignment, but you certainly can. And game design documents they encourage those to that are interested in writing game design documents to include screenshots or at least storyboards that talk about this. But let's look at this example here. This is a really good example of a game treatment. Uh, so this title is Galaxy. Technically, I would put that in italics, but anyways, so it's a game for the Android, iOS, and so the gender plays an interesting role in this cosmic themed organically growing game of the sexes and blah blah blah. So there's the description of the game, right? Okay, multiple screens a user needs to be aware of. So avatar, lab, deep space map. So that's just kind of the setup here, this first part, and then the game description. So the overall concept is analogous to science fiction, right? Mario Party and resource collection kingdom building game set on structure, gamified psychology, and sociology. So he's got the background story here. What's the tone of the game? And as he describes it, one of self exploration and discovery set in a futuristic sci fi environment. Narrative. After the initiating sequence, players will begin to create their own avatar based upon their answers to various personality questions and skills, and so on and so forth. He goes into the detail about the heart of the game, right? What's the objective of the game? The gameplay itself, the AI. Um, Now, remember, this does not have to be an APA, so he's using bullet points here. That's totally fine. Then goes into detail about the characters, multiplayer options, the world itself and the environment, the controls, on-screen options. Okay, so that's a pretty good description of what we're looking for here. Pretty good example of what we're looking for here. So, and by the way, it should be pointed out here that it does not necessarily have to be for a platform game. It can be a computer game. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Facade. Let me type that in the chat box if you want to look this up. There's a game named Facade that came out. It's kind of an experience in virtual reality, and it came. Actually, you can probably get it for free for all I know, but you can go on YouTube. But that was a game where it was just for the computers, and the whole point of the game. It's kind of funny to sound. It's kind of stupid to say, but it's true that the whole point of the game is that you go to this party and this couple is fighting, and your job is to say things to try to get them to reconcile. So as stupid as that was, that turned out to be a very popular game, right? As stupid as the setup sounds, it turned out to be a really really popular game, right? So the game could be something as simple as that, or it could be something like Grand Theft Auto 5. Like there's lots of environments, there's lots of challenges and things like that. Yeah, like Angry Birds, for example. Yeah, yeah. And those of you that are going to be doing games, you might look for next week. You don't have to do this for this week, but for next week, you might want to look at a company called Steam, right? That's a company that's sort of like a self-publishing company for games. but there's some other ones out there, for apps and things like that, that you can look at. But for this week, all you're doing is kind of this treatment. So it's a little bit different for you guys in the gaming world because whereas the TV and film and book and music people have to follow a certain template, you guys don't necessarily have a set template for the game treatment, but just try to include as much as this stuff as you can, right? So that the agent or the developer knows as much as possible about the game that you're describing and the game that you want to come up with, right? So that's the game treatment. Okay, so moving on now to books. Okay, this is for those of you that are going to be doing books, magazines, and um, when I say books, both fiction and nonfiction. Yeah, Trinity. Yes, certainly. If you have a idea that you want to map out, yeah, if you want to submit that, that'd be fine. Yeah. Okay, so with books, okay, so your template is going to look something like this. Remember, once again, not to sound like a broken record, but if you go online, you can find tons of examples of book proposals and how what they're supposed to look like and things like that. But I think I mentioned this last week that one of the very frustrating things for authors is the fact that when they consult an agent, one agent wants one thing and another agent wants another thing, and it can be very frustrating. But just for simplicity, for the sake of this assignment, we're just asking you guys to follow this template. Okay, so it should look something like this. So you have the overview. This is just the 500 words or less kind of description about the book itself. And you guys have all picked up a book, for example, like this is what would kind of go on the back of the cover, right? Or sometimes the inside cover of a book, right? Where there's just the basic description of what the book is about. And, this is, sometimes they have quotes and things like that. But I mean, if you were looking at like, kind of a description about the book itself, there's kind of a 500 word or less kind of basic summary about what it's about. That's the overview section, right? That's number one. Number two would be the target audience. Like, who is the book for? Number one. And what other groups of readers might also be interested. Sometimes these things will overlap. So, as an example, next week we'll talk about Kim's book. And that book has one main audience, I would say, those people that are interested in this historic serial killer. We'll talk about that serial killer next week when we talk about the book. But then there's all these sort of other groups that kind of overlap and might be interested as well. Legal scholars, those interested in feminist history, European history in the 16th century, other things like that. So and so Max asks, okay, couldn't the overview be the preface but revisited to meet the proposal requirements? Yeah, basically, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's what the overview could be. Okay, so after target audience, you have a little bit about yourself, standard biography information, credentials, competitive titles. Now, for this, I will just say too that sometimes your competitive titles might overlap in terms of media. What I mean by that is that sometimes you could point out, if you're doing a book, you could point out some competitive titles, but you might also point to a movie that's really popular. Now, the thing I really want to emphasize though about competitive titles is don't view this section as sort of intimidating at all. Like, you're not trying to downplay the competition. To the contrary, the competitive titles section is actually, when you think about it, used to your advantage, because what you're doing is you're saying that this genre is popular and this is what separates my book. So what I mean by that is, for example, let's just say that I'm doing a book on vampires right now. And at first I could list, well, the Twilight books, and there's a million other ones out there, right, that are really popular right now. And I could say, oh, that's overwhelming, that's intimidating. But no, no, no. What you do with this competitive title section, what you're really kind of saying to the agent is, look, this genre is really, really popular right now. So that means that there's a hunger for this type of genre that I'm doing. And this is what makes my book unique. So with the competitive titles, you might want to drop a line in there at the end of your competitive titles and say, hey, but the reason that my book is different is because, and that way that's kind of a selling point. So don't be intimidated by this section at all, right? Then next is marketing and promotion. You guys have had that branding class, of course, and but you could talk about what types of magazines would you like to advertise in, what types of outlets there are, radio interviews, things like that. You can even talk about social media. We'll get more into that in weeks 3 and 4. But at this point, you certainly can talk about social media marketing. Will you have a Facebook page, of course? What people in the industry can give you blurbs, for example? Any kind of media and speaking appearances that you might be interested in. And about this point, though, let me just point out something here because sometimes people think, well, I'm not going to be able to go on TV and talk about my book, or I'm not going to be able to go on a radio station. You would actually be surprised. There's lots of outlets out there. And for example, right here in Orlando, Rollins radio station, which I believe is 91.5, they do these types of things with local artists all the time. They'll do interviews with you, and a lot of people listen to that station. Not like it's not like WJRR, like 101.1 or something like that, but still, you get a lot of exposure that way. So don't think that you're not able to get any kind of media or speaking appearances because you'd be surprised. And even internet channels, things like that. Okay. Serialization. What parts of your book may lend themselves to being excerpted in other parts? And let me give you a real world example of this. Suzanne, who we showed you her letter last week for the query letter, she did a book on yoga, right? And it turns out that like she did a whole book on it, right? And it turns out that she took one of her chapters in that book and was able to send it to some journals, some academic journals, and they printed it, right? So that's what we call serialization. What parts of the book might, they're not going to print the whole book, of course, but maybe they'll print a chapter of it, right? That's serialization. So what parts of your book lend themselves to being perhaps excerpted in magazines and journals? And even to, on a related note, let's just say, for example, there was, let's just say I'm using a real world example of a student from last month. In fact, no, I don't think that I have hers up as an example, but I think she was doing a story on like domestic violence, right? And like she was like a nonfiction story of like someone that she knew that was a victim of domestic violence. Well, part of that book, or at least a magazine might be interested in covering that story from that she knows about in their magazine, right? So that's serialization, more or less, right? Where they're taking parts of your story and then talking about them in their journal. That's what we call serialization. And then any kind of other promotional things that you can think of, right? And then here for detailed table of contents, this is one thing I want to emphasize with this part right here. Okay, we don't expect you to, like I said, we don't expect you to have a full book written at this point. That's totally fine. But you should be able to identify at least the main parts of your book. And we'll just say, hypothetically, 10 chapters, right? And so let's just say that, for example, I'm doing a story or a book on, let's just say that it's nonfiction, and I'm doing a story on world leaders of the 20th century. Now, I could arrange that by chronologically by decades. So I could have like chapter one could be maybe introduction. Chapter two could be about the 1910s. Chapter three could be about the 20s, and then the next chapter could be about the 30s and the 40s and 50s, and it could be chronological like that, or it could be thematic, right? You could have a whole section. Let's just say that we're doing same topic, and I have like chapter one is introduction. Chapter two might be leaders of uh, Europe. Chapter three might be leaders of North America. Chapter three might be leaders of South America. And so it could be thematic in that sense, right? So, but just kind of explain sort of a list of chapters. We'll just say 10, right? And what happens? Just give us a brief paragraph about what happens in those chapters, like what each chapter is about. And then sample chapters. Okay, once again, this is one of the benefits of going to these go-to meetings is that I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do anything for this number 7 here for sample chapters. You would simply write sample chapters would go here in this section. You don't actually have to include chapter. You certainly can if you want to, but it's not required for this assignment. Okay. But in real life, if you were doing this, the agent might want you to give them a sample chapter. So just be aware of that. Okay, so let's look at some examples here. I think I might have 2, if I'm not mistaken here. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to show her name there. So, but anyways, this is from last semester. So this is hers, and her overview. She says, "Okay, have you ever picked up a book and couldn't put it down until the very last page? And it is what it is. The drama is so surreal that you can't help but feel a part of the scene as you flip the pages." And she goes into detail about what it's about, right? So Camille left the project in Chicago to travel the road with Pablo, her boyfriend of 3 years. Pablo was born and raised in Miami, but his parents were from Ecuador. And then, we won't get too much into the content here, but pretty good overview here. Target audience. She describes this audience as being both male and female between the ages of 13 and 30. Most likely students. Okay, about the author, just a brief biography, right? Competitive titles. She lists 5 here. That's probably a good number to shoot for. I would say 5. And the only thing, though, that I would say for this is you don't want to include a whole list of quotations, right? Like, she actually has a list of quotations. I would actually describe those each in her own words, right? But then she goes into, but this is the point that this is what I wanted to show you, though. She says, okay, here's these titles, but look, this will be different than the other major novels that I listed due to the suspense and uniqueness of the tale. The 5 books I listed share the same target audience as my book, although Pablo was Camille's midnight to winter. Pablo is a smoother, laid-back fellow. So she's describing like what makes her book different. One point, though, on this that I just thought of, you want to make sure that you're using the third person. So you see right here where she says that I listed, you would just say something like, that were listed above, something like that. Make sure to keep I out of it. In fact, when you're talking about about the author, you would actually talk about yourself in the third person. Sounds a little bit odd, but that's how they do it in the business world, right? And then marketing and promotion. Your marketing and promotion at this point doesn't have to be that extensive, but once again, usually, the more detail that you can provide, the better, right? And then detailed table of contents. Now, again, she's providing a lot of content here. You probably don't have to be this extensive, but she's just listing the first 9 chapters in this case. That's okay, right? Now, you don't have to be this detailed, but just give us a brief paragraph what happens in each chapter, and then sample chapters. And then she actually does have a sample chapter, like a short one, and then she actually says to be continued. I mean, you don't have to provide sample chapters. You can just simply put sample chapters and then simply would go here. And that's fine. I'll see if I have another example. I don't. Oh, wait, maybe I do. Okay, yeah, here's another example of a book proposal. Oh, this is actually a magazine. So for those of you that are not doing a book, but a magazine, this is what yours would kind of look like. You're following the same basic pattern, although in terms of sample chapters, you can't really do that, right? But instead of sample chapters, what you would do is down here where you can see here in every issue, these are kind of her sample chapters. So what happens in every issue? Or even if you want to be hypothetical and say like some issues would include this, some issues would include a story on this or something like that, that would be sufficient for your sample chapters. Um, or I'm sorry, let me back up. I meant the table of contents for that. Okay, that's what I meant. So that's her detailed table of contents is the introduction. She could be a little bit more descriptive here in this section for the table of contents, but at least she's providing, okay, here's what happens in every issue. But let's go back up at the top here, just look here. So her proposal for this magazine, technically speaking, you would want to put italics here because you want to put titles in italics, right? But it's for artists and those interested in the arts. This magazine will be available in digital formats. And so this is kind of the overview, right? And then she's talking about the target audience. Once again, this is a situation where you would want to use the third person. So let's just say that her name is Maggie Smith. Maggie Smith's writing style, or you could even exclude the first name and just put Smith's writing style is eclectic, and her fan base includes a wide range. And she's written a lot of novels, so. And then competitive titles. She lists 2 magazines here. Once again, I would try to aim for more than just 2 for your competitive titles. Marketing and promotion. Now, she even mentions AdWords. A lot of you know what that is already, but that's something that you'll learn more about in next month's class when you have Kristen for digital marketing. But if you know about it already, if you want to talk about that for your marketing and promotion, that's okay. People that she could get blurbs from, perhaps people that she knows or could at least target, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea here. And then, yeah, so for sample chapters, it could say sample chapters would go here or see attached documents. That's fine. You don't actually have to include those for this assignment. Okay, and then last but not least is, let me go back here. Okay, last but not least, of course, oh, you know what? We won't get into press kits now. You can certainly look at this, or I'm sorry, I was thinking about press release. If you look down here at the bottom, I'll come back to press release or press kits in a second here. If you want to, for your marketing and promotion, by the way, if you want to take a look in about press releases, we'll talk more about this starting next week in week 4. But that would fall under your marketing and promotion. You don't have to do that for project 2. You don't even have to do that for project 3. But if you're interested in what makes a good press release, I'll talk more about that next week. So, but that would be included in your press release, in your marketing and promotion. Okay, so let's look here. Last but not least, music people. Okay. Well, let's start here actually. Make sure that you follow this template. Remember that some of you might actually have a press kit for real, and that's fine, but just make sure that you at least have these sections for the purposes of this assignment and for the purposes of this class. Now, there's some important things, though, that I want to tell you about, and this is, once again, one of the advantages of going to these go-to sessions, because I'm going to give you some tips here and some things that'll probably save you some time. So Val asks, hypothetically, the press kit is being sent to the music publisher. Well, the press kit is something that you could send to a lot of people. It could be the publisher, it could be the agent. I mean, technically speaking, what we're talking about here would be the agent. But yeah, absolutely, your press kit, once you have that, could be sent to a variety of people. Actually, probably the more people that you send it to, the better off you're going to be, right? But in this case specifically, we're talking about the agent, but it really doesn't matter. Either way, your press kit should follow this format. So the first thing I want to say that might save you a lot of time is that your press kit does not have to be in this form. What I mean by that is that some of you, I'm sure, are already aware of what an electronic press kit is. That's an EPK, and some of you have, for example, a web page that you want to do this in. That's totally fine, okay? So your press kit can be in this format, but it could also be in the form of like a website as long as you have these components here, okay? So in that case, if you're doing an EPK, your press kit cover would be your homepage, for example, okay? But if you are doing it in this format right here, then the cover of your press kit should introduce your band. It should be, you don't have to go crazy with the aesthetics, but at least it should have, your band name, the logo, things like that, anything that's kind of eye-catching. Also, let me go up to the top here. Let me go right up to here. This part, the cover letter, you don't have to do this, okay? So those of you on Team Music, you don't have to do the cover letter. The reason being is that your cover letter is technically considered the query letter that you wrote to the agent last week. So you don't actually have to provide or reprint your cover letter, okay? You can put that if you want to, but you don't have to. But you need to have a cover page, or if you're doing an EPK, you need to have your home page, of course. You need to have a bio page. Now, technically, if you are in a band, you should have, I would say, a biography of the band itself, like where your roots come from, what type of style you guys are, what your influences are. And then also, in addition to that, try to have a biography for each member of the band. Okay? It doesn't have to be terribly long, but just a brief biography of each member of the band. Okay? Okay, so Daphne, you have to go. That's fine. I'll put this in the archives later tonight, so that's fine. Okay, band photo. Now here's another thing. Don't worry about this part where it says black and white 8x10s. Actually, it doesn't even say black and white anymore. I guess that got changed. But anyways, don't worry about the 8x10s. That's the old industry standard, but it doesn't have to be 8x10 photos. So in other words, you can just have any kind of photos of your bands. You know, that's totally fine. But just make sure you have some pictures of you guys playing or at least posing, right? Next is equipment page. Okay, uh, what we don't want to see here is people just saying, "Oh, just need a microphone and a guitar or something like that." No, try to be a little bit more specific than that. The reason being is that let's just say that your agent is trying to get your work published, and as part of getting you published, they want to get you a live performance somewhere. Well, guess what? They need to know what your equipment specifications are, because some of you that might be like good guitar players, for example, know that if you ever see Slash from Velvet Revolver play, or Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Audio Slave, if you see those guys play, they don't just have one guitar. They have specific guitars, and they even use specific guitars for specific songs, right? And so you need to be as specific as possible with the equipment here. Because if they set you up for a gig, even though, once again, we're not talking about just that, we're not just talking about talent and gigs here for this class, but hypothetically, let's just say that they get you published, but as part of that, you have to play somewhere. They need to know and be able to inform the venue what your specifications are to make sure that you can play there, right? So your equipment page is there, your booking page, have a page on your press kit somewhere where somebody can get a hold of you if they do want to get you a gig. Once again, that's not the emphasis of this class, but for the press kit, that certainly needs to be included, right? Just contact information. Next, a demo CD or flash drive. You don't actually have to have this, because once again, some of you might be doing this hypothetically. That's totally fine. But you would actually put here, demo CD would go here, something like that. Song list. Once again, you could make this up if you don't have any songs, but you would include a song list and then a gig sheet, a list of places where you played. In this section, don't just think that you have to have played at the Amway Center or Madison Square Garden or the LA Coliseum or things like that. When we talk about gigs, we're also talking about, local venues, right? Just playing at a bar at open mic night that counts, right? That's a place that you played live in front of people. So don't just feel like it has to be like major venues. And then and once again, you can be a little bit hypothetical here. Don't be too crazy though in terms of exaggeration. Don't say that you sold out, the Amway Center the last 365 nights and you have screaming fans and things like that. I mean, don't be unrealistic here, but you can be a little bit hypothetical. And then newspaper clippings, reviews, um, testimonials. For this section, this is important actually. This can include things that people say on your Facebook page, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be from newspapers or magazines or things like that, but even your fans on your Facebook page would count if you have an official Facebook page for your band or things like that. That counts for newspaper clippings and testimonials, okay? You would include business cards. If you don't have this for real, that's okay. Just include a template of what your business card would look like. And then the envelope, you would do this in real life. For the envelope, you don't have to have anything for that section because you're submitting this. But I mean, in real life, if you were doing this, you would have a physical envelope and just make sure that you have a good envelope, right? And of course, if you're doing an EPK, you don't have to worry about that either. But now here's the question before I show you the example. This question comes up all the time. Well, if I'm doing this assignment, if I'm on team music and I'm doing a press kit, what format do I do this in? And the answer is it's kind of up to you. If you want to do an EPK, that's fine. In fact, there's a site I think that's called powerpresskits.com that used to offer free press kit templates. I'm not sure if they still do. But if you want to do an EPK, that's fine. If you even want to do this on Microsoft Word, you can do that. If you want to do it in Keynote, which I think seems to be the most popular one, that's fine. If you want to do it on Pages, that's okay. The only thing with that though is because our system sometimes has trouble with, at the moment, has trouble with Pages. Just go ahead and convert it to a PDF, but that would be fine. And those are the things that you have to do for the press kits. Okay, now let me show you an example of a press kit, and then we'll wrap things up here. Okay, I think I had two examples. Maybe I just have this one. That's okay. Okay, so this is a student from a couple months ago that did a really nice job on this assignment. Let me go ahead here and zoom in. Now he includes the letter. You don't really need to do the letter, of course, as I mentioned, but you can put that in there if you want to. And then he's got, of course, band pictures, right? This is kind of a good sort of cover, if you will. So band pictures, and let me zoom out a little bit actually now. Okay. Then he's got a pretty good biography here. Again, we don't have to read the content here, but you can see biography probably a little bit more than you need. But then he's got a list of equipment, and let me just zoom in on this a little bit here. Once again, like I said, he's not just saying like, oh, all I need is a microphone and a MacBook Pro. He's going into a lot of detail here, which is good. That's what you need here. Then he's got his booking information. Then he's got his song list and gig sheet. So you don't need a whole ton of songs, but I mean just a few, right? And then past shows where he's played. Lyrics are optional. You don't have to include lyrics. Press clips. Your press clips or clippings, once again, now he's doing a screenshot, but I mean, these don't have to be from newspapers. He's just including stuff from off of his Reverb Nation page, right? Comments, fan comments, and things like that. That's okay. That counts. Business card. This is what his business card would look like, and that's it. So just make sure that you include all these elements. And as you can see, just from an aesthetic standpoint, not that aesthetics counts that much, but I mean, this just looks really, really nice, right? He does a nice job of putting this together. And you can always tell the difference between someone that takes it seriously and then somebody that just puts it together at the last seconds, right? Okay, so Trinity asks, why exactly does the equipment matter in this document? Well, once again, okay, this document would go to the agent, right? And it doesn't so much matter for a specific work necessarily trying to get published, but you can be sure that the agent, when they go about trying to get your work published, they're going to be shopping this around. And then as part of, let's just say that somebody wants to take it on, some of the, this is just a standard press kit that they're going to be asking for. So whether, even if makes no difference in terms of um, getting your song sold necessarily, this is still kind of standard in the industry. You always want to make sure to have that information, if that makes sense. And then some people have asked too, like, do you have to do like what do they call those, runners or whatever? No, you don't have to include that for that for this assignment, but just make sure that you follow these templates and have these sections here, and you should be okay. Yeah, so Trinity, I feel as though it's a bit outdated. Well, the way that technology moves, it might not be actually, because there's more sort of equipment out there than ever before. So, but in any case, though, that is a good point, though, that you could say, well, most venues are going to be conducive to like almost anything that you can bring in. Most good venues, but nonetheless, though, that's standard in the industry. Okay, so before we get to the attendance questions, does anybody have any last minute questions? Okay, okay. So this went pretty long tonight. Usually they don't go this long, but that's okay. We're pretty much done here. Let me just kind of go through with the attendance questions here, and let me find them. Okay. So for week 2, okay, so Trinity asks, okay, I guess I don't understand why they would need to know what equipment I used. Well, once again, this is just kind of a standard industry kind of press kit. So it's also, I mean, there's certain things in the industry, like I can give you an example of like the film industry. There's certain things that you might ask questions why. Why does the format have to be a certain way? Why does a script here? Let me show you an example of well, I don't have a script here, but in the film industry, for example, you have to take a script like this and you have to have 3 hole punches, and you have to use brads in the first and the third, and they won't accept it any other way. Why? It makes no sense, but that's just the way that it is in the industry. So that's just sometimes they have rules that you just have to follow, and you just don't really question, I guess, until they decide to change the industry. So okay, so for the attendance questions, let's take a look here at these. Okay, number 1, this is, I think, the same question as last week, but what piece of real or hypothetical content have you chosen for the project? And ideally, this should be the same content that you chose for project 1. Once again, as a reminder, ideally for this class, the project that you do is going to be the same content for projects 1, 2, and 3, or the same concept, the same idea. If you want to change it, you have to ask us, just ask us. But ideally, you would want to have the same content just to make it simpler for yourself, actually. Um, so just try to keep the same content for that you did last week, and then keep that same idea for this week's project 2, and then keep the same project or idea in mind that you're going to be using for project 3 when you self-publishing it. Today we're just talking for project 2. We're just talking about still publishing it the traditional way. So that's number 1, is like, what's your content, right? So whatever you did for project 1, that's your content. Number 2, specifically, what type of material will you be working on project 2? So once again, those of you in film will be doing a treatment. Those of you in TV will be doing a treatment. Those of you in books and magazines will be doing proposal. Those of you on music will be doing a press kit. And those of you in games will be doing a game treatment. Or if you really want to go crazy, you can do a game design document. But that's extensive. Okay, number 3, are there a certain number of pages required for this assignment? The answer is no. And the reason for that, why or why not, right here, the reason for that is because this is a real world document, and the real world doesn't operate on page minimums or maximums in most cases. So what I mean by that is, like, if you take a look here at the screenplay, for example, of The Godfather, and then you compare that to the screenplay of Corky Romano, right? Chances are that The Godfather is going to be a little bit longer, right, than Corky Romano. So the real world doesn't operate necessarily in page numbers that way. Number 4, are you required to use APA? The answer is no. Number 5, where can you find templates and information in the course material? Well, basically, you could say the appendix, what we just looked at, the appendix of the textbook for that. So the appendix of the book. And then number 6, what team have you joined for the Google Doc assignment? Well, we went over this in class today, but I mean, basically, everybody's pretty much at this point picked a team, right? So you're either in team books, team film slash TV, team games, or team music, right? One of those 4. Number 7, what kind of content will you be posting to your team's Google Doc? And I think we mentioned this in class, but of course, it can be content that's related to your industry. So anything that's happening in your industry, it could be content that's related specifically to the class, for example, those of you on team music, if you find a good source for EPKs and you want to throw that into your team's Google Docs, that's okay. It could be content from your, let's just say that you're in the music industry and you find a good blog from on Russell Simmons's website. That would be fine, and you want to throw that in there because you think it's interesting. That's fine. So just anything that's relevant to your industry and to your team's assignments, basically, is fine. And number 8, how many posts should you have to be assured of a good grade? Well, like I said in class, there's no set number, minimum or maximum, but ideally you would want to put in there like 14 would probably be the good answer for that. So 14. And how often do you need to post? Again, like I said in class, this really doesn't get graded until the end of the month, but the answer, I guess, to number 9 would be about every other day, or maybe we'll say like 3 times a week, like every other day, or, you know. And then finally, number 10, is it acceptable to reply or comment to your teammates' posts? I should have mentioned this today in class a little bit more, but the answer is yes, obviously. So, for example, if Mac finds a great article and wants to share that on his team's Google Doc, and then Christopher finds another uh, article or wants to say, "Hey, that's a good article," and here's another one or something like that. That's totally fine. So yes, you can absolutely reply and comment on your teammates' posts. And so, and it's Trinity says, okay, I agree. It's another outdated issue. They used to use three pronged for the books need to print for a certain time period. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, these things, sometimes there's just things that you have to follow. So that's true. Maybe one day they'll change, but so at this point, I think we're pretty much done. Unless anybody has any last minute questions, we'll go ahead here and I'll put this up on the archives so you can check this later out on our Google Docs page. It takes a while though, just so you know, unfortunately. So it'll be up later tonight, but it might be a while for it to actually show up. But if there's no other questions, I guess I want to thank everybody for attending. Normally we don't go this long, so I apologize for that. It's maybe the longest we've ever actually gone, but it's good though because we got some important information covered, and Kim should be back on Thursday in class, so we'll see everybody on Thursday. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, just feel free to send us an email, and we'll get back to you. And like I said, I know we didn't get to the quiz today, but just remember that that's going to be on Thursday. So just kind of look over those questions again, and be sure to study hard for that. And Kim will be covering chapters 12, 13, and 14, I believe. And then also Alvin, I don't see Alvin here, but Alvin has his current event presentation on Thursday as well. So we'll do that at the beginning of the class. Okay, so thank you guys all for attending. I'll go ahead here and I'll close things off, but wish everybody a good rest of the evening. And we'll see everybody on Thursday. And for you online students, we'll see you again, same time, same place next Tuesday at 6. And so everybody have a good rest of the evening.